And good to see you, Doshin. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.
Great. So, hey, Doshin, you've got a little bit of feedback coming from your, probably your microphone.
Let's see if we can fix that.
And while we're doing that, be good to see who I think most faces I see are familiar, but is there anyone for whom this is your first time? Either the Wisdom Gym, yeah, Fabian, Namali, welcome. Anyone else? Yeah, Caroline, yeah, great, welcome, guys. So, oh, let's see. You know what, Doshin? It might just be a case of turning it down a little bit, volume-wise. That's what it sounds like. But while you're doing that, I'll mute you. And I'll explain what we're doing, and then I'll unmute you and do a proper intro. But yeah, so the format wise of the Wisdom Gym, I mean, the intention of the Wisdom Gym is really that we bring some of the best teachers, facilitators we know to come and share their wisdom, as many of you will already know. And today's format is, I'm going to talk to Doshin a little bit about the shadow and what the shadow is, where we can see it playing out in ourselves and in culture, and then also what the process looks like of owning it. You know, it's become an increasingly popular and important theme, I think, over the last few years. And I think for me personally, understanding it and understanding how it works has been really fundamental to my own life, and perhaps one of the most grounding and real changes that I've seen in my life has been through staying connected to the many shadows that I have and that we all have. So after we do a kind of conversation for a while, then we'll go into a breakout room and we'll do an inquiry around this. It'll be a slightly different inquiry than you might have done if you're on Sense Making 101 or similar session somewhere else. And then we're going to come back and there'll be an opportunity to ask Doshin questions. And also, if you want to sort of inquire a little bit more deeply into your own shadows, that there's
be careful.
Yeah. Yes, there is that option for the brave. But I would say, you know, we've been doing, Doshin's been on the faculty of Sense Making 101 for it's over a year now. And I've worked with Doshin myself privately. We know many people who've worked with him, and I really think he is one of the best. If you want to explore the shadow a little bit, stick a toe in, perhaps. This is a really nice opportunity to do that. So yeah, and of course, we often put these out on the channel. If you don't want to be in it at all, just let us know afterwards, and we'll make sure you're not, so you don't feel like you're going to be exposed in some way you don't want to be. There's the opportunity to be anonymous if you want to be. So yeah, Doshin, I'm very excited to have you back and be once again talking about the shadow. And yeah, I mean, what might be good is to begin with a definition of what the shadow is, just briefly, and then I would be curious to just start off with hearing from you what shadows you are most aware of in the culture right now. So what the shadow is and what you're seeing.
Boy, that's a loaded question, isn't it? Thank you, Ali. Yes, the simplest definition I've heard was one of my students. I gave him an elaborate definition of what shadow was, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, shadow is just the me that I can't see." And of course, that's the simple version. It's the part of me that I can't see as an object. Therefore, I don't know it's there, but yet it's active in my life. You know, my wife knows it's there. All my friends know it's there. I'm the only one that hasn't been clued in. So that's an individual shadow. And correspondingly, there's a we that we can't see. We can't see the culture that we're in. We can't see the water we're swimming in. We can't see what the beliefs and value of that group really are as an object, because we're so engaged in them, we're identified with them. And this can really be a problem. particularly because the moment you join a we, that we is automatically at war with a them. And this war between us and them has been going on since the beginning, before the beginning of recorded time. So this is even more problematic when the weapons of war have gotten so devastatingly sophisticated. A better definition, much more thorough definition of shadow, is one that Ken Wilber proposes. And he says shadows are addictions and allergies in both states and structures of consciousness and what drives them. So this has led me into really serious examination and inquiry into the what I call the whole spectrum of shadows, from the karma, our karmic roots in the beginning of time, to our family karma. You know, how many of you have fucked up family karma? Anybody? Almost always all hands go up, or real close to all hands. We all have skeletons in our closets. So karma, family karma, pre-birth issues, it's not easy being born. It can be very shocking. Things can happen, go wrong. To early development, early childhood development, the insecure attachment issues is one window to view these. Pre-verbal trauma is another window. And then, you look at the whole development of human beings, individuals, and you see the stages of development that we go through. And there are many developmental theorists that we can study that have a different perspective on that. And this is what Ken Wilber has done by really summarizing, studying deeply in a scholarly way, and summarizing their findings in a way that is filtered through one mind. So it's easier for one other mind, yours or mine, to understand. And that's probably enough to put you to sleep for now. Ali, let's move into something that is a little more active for them.
Yeah. So now that we've gotten a definition we can work with, the second part of that question was where you're seeing those shadows right now in the world.
Yes. Well, I'm a Zen guy. So I see that, if we look at the Trikaya in Buddhism, which is the gross body of the Buddha, the subtle body of the Buddha, and the causal empty body of the Buddha, the truth body. I work with individuals, and it's my job to assess what state of consciousness they reside in so that I can assist them to increase the states of consciousness that they're able to experience and reside in a reliable way. So I notice that people we all are born in the gross state of consciousness. Our mind works in a gross way, a pre-operational way, Piaget would say. And then it moves into concrete operational. And when we move into the postmodern level of consciousness, think the revolution that happened in consciousness in the 60s. I'm a child of the 60s. It was great. Some of you I see were there, some of you weren't. Boy, it was fun, wasn't it? Did you have fun during that time? I had a ball. During this period in time in individual development, some would say we automatically move from a gross way of thinking about the universe to a subtle way. We move from making sense out of things to making meaning out of the things that we've already made sense out of. And we're moving from concrete manipulation of physical objects to subtle manipulation of energies and forms. Think of the difference between Chinese medicine and Western medicine. Western medicine is identifying all these diseases, which it looks at as things, Where Chinese medicine is looking at where the energy stops flowing, where the energy is stuck in the body, and what needs to happen to free that energy. This is a much more subtle way of approaching disease and medicine and healing. When I work with students in Zen, we're not interested in making sense out of things. We're not interested in making meaning out of things. I mean, meaning is fine, sense is fine. What we're interested in is liberating the individual from the mind that needs to make sense of things and the mind that needs to make meaning from things. And this is liberation. We're interested in liberating the mind in freedom. And it's a very different project. Um, and there's no reason you can't do all of these things. But not every teacher is going to know how to help you. You know, this is where we get into when I asked Ken Wilber, what is the most important thing, which is a infamous koan, he gave me a really precise answer. He said that I'm going to tell you what the most important thing is, but I'm not going to tell you what order to do it in. You know, you got to figure that out for yourself. Some people have to make sense of things first. Some people have to make meaning of things they make sense out of. And some people are really interested in liberation. You know, it doesn't matter which mountain you start climbing. You know, there isn't just one mountain, as the myth says. You know, all paths lead to the top of the mountain. All paths lead somewhere, but there are many mountains. There's the mountain of sense making, the mountain of meaning making, and the mountain of liberation. You know, climb whichever one you feel you need to now, but know that you must, if you want to be free, you must climb them all. And it doesn't matter on the order in which you climb them. Now, of course, that's contrary to how I feel about it because I'm a Zen guy. You're damn right it matters to me. So Wilbur was giving me a little teaching piece as he was telling me what the most important thing was. He was telling me it doesn't matter as much as I think it does, which I thank you, Ken. I get it now. Took a while. So that liberation, the most important thing, according to Ken, which I would agree completely being a Zen master, the most important thing is to become one with emptiness. To become one with emptiness, because then you will truly be free. And to me, in a real practical way, what that means is you have let go of all your agendas, both individual and collective. You expect nothing from anyone. You're giving everything freely with a spirit of generosity. I don't know if you've noticed, but spirituality has become a big business. And I just can't bring myself to focus on an agenda where I charge for these priceless teachings. You know, but that's the stand I'm taking now. And every time I run into a teacher that keeps having his hand out, I question them very severely. What's your agenda? Do you want to teach? Or do you want me to give you money? Do you want me to do something? These teachings must be given freely. Now that, you know, that if you're going to see a therapist, please don't expect them to give it to you for nothing. It costs money to put on these webinars. So don't expect to get that for nothing. But if you're talking to a Zen master, expect that to be given freely with no expectations of receiving anything in return. There, I did it. I turned over the money tables in the temple. Oops.
How dare you? I wanted to pick up on something, Doshin, that I don't think I've heard you talk about before, but I'm sure you have a lot to say on, which is spiritual bypassing, the shadows that come up when people are pursuing a spiritual practice, the way people use spirituality in order to do one of the things that create shadows, which is avoiding
Yeah.
our own emotions.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because like you said,
Hmm.
spirituality has become big business. It's become commoditized. So could you talk a little bit about that process of where
Yes.
shadow shows up in spirituality?
Yeah. Um, I think I'm going to go back to the question you asked me right before this one and answer it first. How do I see shadows showing up in our culture? I see them showing up as prejudices. It's all about prejudices. If I am not aware of part of me that is extremely prejudiced, that prejudice is active and I can't see it. So I'm prejudiced as hell in shadow. And isn't this the case with all of us? Is anybody out there prejudiced? I would argue that we all are. The question is not, are you prejudiced? The question is, do you know what your prejudices are? And if you don't, then they're active and you're acting on them and you're creating suffering for yourself and everyone around you. We can have religious prejudices, we can have racial prejudices, we can have this ironic prejudice against prejudices that we're willing to kill and to die for. What happened to Martin Luther King and Gandhi? What happened to nonviolence? What happens when that nonviolent march turns into a lynch mob and a riot? It's the violence that's bred by prejudice, hatred. This is the three poisons of Buddhism: greed, hatred, and ignorance or delusions. These are very fundamental human qualities that we have to examine in ourselves. So, the prejudices, whenever you get a group, another one of my students gave me a wonderful concept. I have this term that I call belief system, right? And I got it from one of my teachers. He was an urban shaman, he was quite a character. He would say something like, and Ronald Reagan was president at the time, so he said, that Ronald Reagan, I could carve a better belief system out of a banana. You ever tried to carve a banana? In other words, Reagan's belief system, and now we have Trump we can talk about. I'm not going to go there. There's a collective shadow or two. I get such a charge out of people that just go ragging about Trump, right? And the irony is, and Americans aren't very good at irony, and all the Europeans know that. This is one of the American shadows. My European song gets spent 2 sessions trying to show me what irony is. I just didn't get it. Isn't that ironic? But the irony of someone complaining so severely and getting so worked up about all Trump's shortcomings without owning the Trump within them. Yeah, I mean, own your own Trump, and then start complaining about Trump, but not before. Boy, that's a good way to start a fight. I wouldn't recommend starting that conversation. It's emotionally charged and it will explode. There's a shadow right there. Whenever things explode, there's a shadow, a hidden shadow that's just become visible. Whenever things polarize, every time things polarize, there's a collective shadow. And they're too numerous to mention. And be careful pointing them out because it's not very popular. So, um, we could go on and on and on. So this belief system, the initials are BS. What's that smell? What is that smell? Oh shit, it's my BS, my belief system. All of our belief systems stink. Birds of a feather flock together and the same colored feathers smell the same. Oh, this is not going to be popular. I can see that now. A little too much truth. Nietzsche said, he said, you can measure a person's character by how much truth they can hold at once. Isn't that brilliant? I heard Jordan Peterson say that. I haven't been able to look it up and see whether Nietzsche really said it or not, but it sounds good. Yeah. So this where these tectonic plates of one culture rub against another culture, and that the tension increases, the polarization of forces increases. Nature will have a way of easing the tension, even if we don't. There'll be an earthquake, there'll be some type of a catastrophic event that balances out the opposing forces. It's been that way since the beginning of time. I have no idea what it'll be. Don't have a crystal ball, but that seems to be where we're headed. You know, uh, there seems to be something in the air that we all know. There are all these zombie movies. I don't want to get into Vervaeke's territory, but something's going on, and I see the shadows moving. I feel like Carl Jung must have felt before World War II. He saw the dreams and the images of his patients, of the people he was working with, and they were deeply troubled. And he could see these collective demons moving in the unconscious. And, I see them in the bardos of active living, where we all live, in very similar way to what I expect he experienced. So, um, what can we do? Well, as Jung said, our our most effective thing that we can do is make the unconscious conscious. So take these things that bug us about people like Trump, and let it point us to our own shadow, and do the bloody work. Dig out the shadow, work with somebody that knows about shadows, and own it. Make the unconscious conscious. 321 or 3210 is a great thing. Voice dialogue. There's hundreds of shadow tools out there today. Find somebody to work with and dig yours out. Do your part. And the collective shadows, unfortunately, there's not many people working with the collective shadows. Not yet. Hopefully there'll be many more. They're a little trickier to work with because you have whole groups that polarize, you know, and if you attack an us, then you become part of them and you start being attacked. You start a war. And the mechanics and the dynamics of this are not very well understood today. And it has a lot to do, in my view, with emotions. You know, Durkheim came up with a term he called collective effervescence. And it's the collective emotion, that the rising emotional tide that lifts all ships in the harbor. Like, for example, when you go to a classical music concert or a rock concert or a football game, your team's winning, everybody gets excited, everybody feels good. Your team loses, everybody collapses and feels terrible. That peaceful march turns into a violent riot. And Jung used the term participation mystique, which he stole from Levi Bruhl, the anthropologist. Participating in the collective emotional mystery that's so much larger than just emotions. It's the mystery of life. And, let's have a war dance. Let's get everybody ready for the war that we're going to fight tomorrow. Let's have a feast. Let's celebrate. These collective emotions spread through groups like fires, like viruses. And Wilhelm Reich called the negative aspect of this an emotional plague. You know, go to a football game when your team's losing and you can feel it, you know? Or as Daniel Goleman said, thoughts are private, emotions are public. Emotions are public. That's after, a few weeks with the Dalai Lama. It was quite an insight he had there. I guess the Dalai Lama will do that to you, I've heard. Yeah. So these are part of the whole spectrum of shadows. You know, it's a large spectrum. It includes all of our experience. And, we don't have a psychology that's sophisticated enough to deal with all of these things. That's why I was so fascinated by Ken Wilber and such good fortune to get to study with the man. Deeply impacted me. Finally, we have a philosophical framework that includes every single aspect of human nature, the whole spectrum of shadows, from karma to group, collective effervescence and participation mystique and emotional plagues. And that's where we are. Isn't it exciting?
Amen. Exciting and terrifying. There's
Oh, you need some fearlessness. You want some?
So it feels like a nice segue actually to go into the breakout so that we can come back and do a little bit of question asking or even doing a bit of work with Doshin. And this breakout is a little bit of fun, and it's the first stage of the 3-2-1 method for integrating the shadow, which, as Doshin was just mentioning, it comes from integral studies. I first came across it when I was 19 reading Integral Spirituality. And then a few years later, it came back to me because I'd had this very, very scary shamanic experience in Peru, encountering a very dark force. And I kind of was reflecting on it like maybe 6 months later. And it kind of had bothered, it had been intense, but it wasn't kind of gnawing away at me, but it was sort of in the background of my awareness. I was like, what was that? Why did that happen? What was going on? And I just suddenly came to me, the 3-2-1 method that I'd read about before came to me. And I thought, wait a minute, because what that method is first the shadow's an it's out there and it's in the third person. And then it's a you're having some kind of dialogue and connection with it. And then it becomes first person. This is me. And so I went through the process. It came back to me and I thought, wait a minute, that was me. That extremely scary experience, that energy, that kind of sadistic, dark energy was me. And that was a really profound moment for me. So one of the best ways, like Doshin was saying, to start identifying and making conscious our shadows is to figure out what is that 3 for us. And a great way to do that is to figure out, who do I really fucking hate? Who just makes my lip curl with contempt? And when we do this exercise in our men's weekends, I often frame it as, you're sitting on a train and a person walks onto the train and you take a look at them and you hate them. You haven't spoken to them, you don't know them, but just something about them is just a visceral sense of contempt, disgust, whatever it might be. That would most likely be your projection of an aspect of yourself that they represent. So this breakout is all about, who do you really hate? And it could be a specific person, or it could be a kind of a type of person: arrogant people, or angry people, or shy people, or your mother, or your cousin, or just go for it. And I think you'll quickly notice that we're all in the same boat, and just have a little bit of fun with it, and just kind of see if you can just give yourself a little bit of space to just go into why, what is it about them. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms. We'll do these in little groups. We'll do it for about, we'll do a couple of minutes each. I won't time it strictly, just make sure everyone has a chance to talk. And when someone's talking, please don't interrupt them. And once everyone's had a chance to share, you can just kind of have an open conversation around it. So the rooms are open. Great. Looks like we're all back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm really curious how everyone's feeling, and would be interested to hear a couple of sharings, reflections, what came up, who did you talk about? And then we'll just open it up to any questions for Doshin, or if you want to inquire, you might even want to inquire a little bit more deeply into what came up for you. If you were surprised by it, or you felt like, wow, that was a strong reaction. Great opportunity to delve in a little bit deeper. So just raise your hand physically. Let's see if we can do it like that. That might work. Gabby.
I seem to be a sucker for punishment, or like being a guinea pig. Um, Doshin, so one of the questions I have for you, because that came up in the group, and even though I don't feel that strongly, I do feel a little bit like that. It's just there are moments that I feel like I'm right there with you, and there are moments that I'm just like, I don't know about this. And part of it felt like uh, some of the things that you're saying felt like, are you really there, or you're just kind of like so tired of repeating the same thing over and over again that you're just kind of clicking that button and running through a script? And that made me think about like my own fears of trust, because this is a kind of like a blanket statement, but I wonder if like so many of us are here in Rebel Wisdom is because we felt betrayed by institutions, and we're like in our own personal quest for the truth, like what is the truth, and then that might resonate with our own fears of personal trust and fears of intimacy. And then like there was a whole conversation on the subject, but I was just wondering, Doshin, if that is something that happens with you a lot, that you feel like some of the challenges is just because people are scared of trusting, and I don't know.
So, safety is a really big deal. First of all, I want to set the record straight. I have talked endlessly about shadows. So, there may be some the word automaticity to it. But what I also know is when I start talking like this, I don't remember what I said, which means I'm not here. So it's spontaneously arising, and that's a very different thing. Now, safety is the most unsafe spiritual path we can take, according to Stephen Levine, the Buddhist teacher. It leaves us frozen in fear, unable to take risks, unable to explore any new territory, unable to learn anything new. And yet, without feeling safe, nothing's going to happen. So trust is a really big deal, Gabby. So I'd like you to really open your heart to the problems you're having with trust. Um, that's one side of it. So on one hand, it really keeps you stuck, and on the other hand, nothing's going to move if you don't feel safe. So you're kind of in between that rock and a hard place. So really open your heart to that and be willing to take risks, but take tiny risks. Take little bites, because where you don't feel safe, there's trauma. And when I'm working with somebody that trauma shows up, I back way off and I slow way down. And you having the courage to step forward is huge. You're trusting something. Uh, and I want to really appreciate that. I want to appreciate that. And this is a huge first step for you. Now, in terms of authenticity, when you take a step forward to go where you don't have a clue where we're going to go, what I'm going to say, what you're going to say. This is a guarantee that we don't flip a switch and go on automatic pilot because there's no roadmaps here. What you're going to say, I have no idea what you're going to say. And it requires me to be completely present with you and really pay attention. And so the safety stuff, boy, I hear that, and I finally acquired enough wisdom to know that I have to deal with people who don't feel safe differently than I have to deal with people that are arrogant and stubborn, which is more like me. So, where would you like to go with this? I mean, where do you feel comfortable? Let's take a little bite and get real with each other.
That's a very good question. So part of me, like when I feel more like myself, I do that. Like I like taking initiative and asking questions, and I tend to be like the obnoxious student that is always raising the arm, and that's kind of how I learn, because as a teacher is speaking, I'm making all sorts of like parallels in my mind, making connections, so the information finds a hook. And I'll ask questions like, oh, is this like this? And if the instructor says yes, and then I'll retain information. If they say no, I just like, okay, go back to the process. But at the same time, this is a public forum. I don't know anyone here, and I have my own like therapy private practice, and the fact that this might be seen by hundreds, thousands, millions of people, it makes me terrified, like on one.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so on
Let's
one
just be
end.
terrified.
Yeah.
Let's just be terrified. It's not so bad being terrified, is it?
Oh, it sucks.
But does it really? The anxiety, the fear of being afraid sucks. But the terror isn't so bad if you're just terrified. If when the selfing shows up and starts processing the fear, then the anxiety comes in. But the anxiety is a very different quality than the raw physiological fear. And the anxiety it's the exact automaticity that you were reacting against. We're creating our anxiety. Our conditioning is creating our anxiety. Our re-traumatizing ourselves. Our story is recreating our anxiety automatically. And it's an opportunity to just interrupt this automaticity in ourselves and get real.
Yeah.
And just open your arms to the fear. Are there any tigers in the room there? Look
No,
around.
last time I checked, just
Nobody's going to
tiny,
eat.
just cats, tiny tigers.
Yeah. So just welcome. In Zen, my teacher used to always say, eat what's on your plate. If you're terrified, be terrified. If you're afraid of being canned and automatic, be afraid of being canned and automatic. Just be present with what is.
Yeah.
And don't worry, everything is impermanent. Nothing lasts forever. And I might add, nothing is the only thing that lasts forever.
Yeah.
Little Zen pun. So, do you feel the difference between that which is happening right now and that which is you're afraid might happen?
Yeah. Like when I'm listening to what you're saying, it's almost like I try to pay attention to my body and the tingling. It was just kind of like, oh, this. It is anxiety, but it's also kind of like excitement and curiosity and wanting to know what you're gonna say next, and just like, oh, this is fascinating. But then there are like moments where I think about like, what if this has some unforeseen consequence, of being, like in a public forum that is being recorded? how can this bite me in the ass in the future? And that's when I feel like there's a tensing up in me.
Yeah.
It's
So who's creating that tensing up, that anxiety?
I am in my head.
You are, aren't you? Isn't that interesting? And it's automatic too, isn't it?
Yep.
Why are
Yeah.
you doing that?
Ah, boy. As I said in the beginning, maybe I'm a sucker for punishment. I don't
Well,
know.
maybe it's just a habit.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
just a habit. Habits are hard to break, you know?
Yeah.
So, I one of the forms of shadow work that I've used extensively, particularly in postmodern groups, is the work of Byron Katie. She doesn't think it's shadow work, but it clearly is.
Mm.
It's not that much different than 3210 process. You identify. She likes to identify thoughts. You identify a thought that is generating angst and suffering. So, what can you think of a thought right now that generates it? It's causing you to be anxious.
Well, as I said, it's just like the idea of becoming a public figure.
Well, but what
Yeah.
is it? It's let's come up with the structure of a thought. Like they are gonna judge me.
Yeah,
How's
exactly.
that?
Of being judged.
Yeah,
And
but let's make it a little more personal than being judged. They are gonna judge me, or me. I'm gonna judge you.
yeah,
What works for you? What resonates as true?
all of these, just being judged, being the receiving end of judgment is
Yeah.
terrifying to me.
But let's not make it abstract. Let's make it concrete
Mhm.
because that makes it personal and real. So, who are you afraid of judging you
Oh,
in this instance right now?
this
This moment?
instance, not you, because like surprisingly enough, I don't feel that I'm being judged by you, but I am.
How insightful
I
of
feel
you.
like I'm hogging the time, and that there are other people who would like to talk to you,
Okay.
and yeah, so
Well, we can honor that if you'd like.
yeah.
You've done a great job. You've been on the hot spot, and it was a real act of moving forward for you. So let's just honor that.
Thank
And
you.
it's been lovely talking to you, Gabby.
Thank you so much,
You're
Doshin.
so welcome. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Gabby. Um, yeah, who would like to go next? Can be anything. Can be a comment, question, Caballero.
Hello, Doshin.
Hello.
I'd like to ask you a question, but I'm also a volunteer for shadow work. Um,
My condolences.
yes, my unconscious mind loves to destroy my reputation, so this is an opportunity.
Wonderful.
My question, in a Jungian landscape, the integration of all archetypes is usually understood as the archetype becoming part of consciousness and being practiced through behaviors. For example, when you integrate the hero, that means that you become better at conquering things. But the shadow seems to be treated like an exception, because when it comes to the shadow, it seems that people think that integration is overcoming the shadow or improving it, especially when the content is seen as bad or is bad.
Mhm.
So
So I'm
someone
I'm going
with,
to interrupt you here because I don't
okay,
agree with your presupposition.
um,
That's not my understanding of Jung, and that's not how I use Jung. Um, it's very different understanding of Jung. So if we begin with, we need to back up and we need to talk about something that's more real that we can have a conversation about. That abstract argument about what presuppositions are true and what aren't just isn't going to lead us anywhere productive. So let's avoid it.
okay.
So what would you like to know? Let's zen it out.
Okay.
And one of the ways of doing that is getting out of your head and letting your heart ask the question.
Okay.
Just get a felt sense of that. What do you really want to know that's important to you?
How can I be bad?
How can you be bad?
Yes.
Well, isn't that an interesting question? How can I be bad? That presupposes that you are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a more direct question would be, how can I behave badly? Well, you can behave badly by causing suffering to others or to
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have one precept, one rule that I follow: create no unnecessary harm. And every time I notice that I'm creating unnecessary harm, I stop. And I stop that behavior. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it takes me a while to notice it. But when I do notice it, I just stop. This is a rule that I have, and I adhere to it religiously. Not blindly, but religiously. I'm devoted to this rule.
Mm-hmm.
To maintain my own integrity, I refuse to create unnecessary harm. So, separating your sense of self from your behavior is a really useful thing to do. When there is an epidemic with the younger than me generation, and that epidemic is what I call toxic shame. And it always goes with a story, and I've noticed it's different in different countries. In America, there's this story that I tell myself that there's something wrong with me. I'm defective. I'm not bad, I'm flawed. And this toxic shame is a cross that many people carry in our postmodern culture. And I noticed many of the people that I work with that are closer to your age than my age really have this. And when I inquire, I see that they got it from their parents. Their parents were trying to encourage them to be the best they could be. And they would say things like, "You can do better, you can do better." And I hear my own voice telling my son that. And seeing later, as I acquired deeper insight, seeing what he actually was hearing when I thought I was assisting him, inspiring him. What he was hearing was, "Fuck, I'll never be good enough. I'll never please this asshole." And that's what he was hearing. I was teaching him how to hold on to this toxic idea that there's something wrong with him. And this is tragic. It's epidemic in our culture. And especially with the younger generation. Yeah, people my age have more guilt problems than they have shame problems, you know? Because my parents were always judging me. You didn't follow the rules, you're a bad person. Yeah. And we all have all of this going on inside of us. So where would you like to go with this? What would be helpful to you?
Well, first of all of the interaction with parents that you mentioned is real in my case. There was the pressure to be better or the best or whatever. So I think that is appropriate to consider.
Yes.
But I am someone with some very intense metaphysical struggles. Like, this is personally important to me. It is. I don't perceive this as a way of escaping my personal reality.
So help me
my,
understand. Help me understand what that means, because I don't know what you mean by those
I can give
words.
you an example, which is the topic of our conversation. That is, um, your teaching or your perception makes me wonder, how would we include harm or even bad inside wholeness? Or should we try to remove these things out of wholeness?
How can you remove something out of wholeness? It won't be whole.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. So if that's the case, then harm and bad must be included.
Mm-hmm. Well, people who do harm and people who have behaviors that cause harm need to be included in our understanding of humanity. There are a lot of psychopaths and sociopaths out there, not as many as we think. You know, again, Nietzsche, he said, insanity among individuals is really quite rare. But among groups, among nations, and I would add cultures, Nietzsche said it is the rule. It is this group warring against that group. It is this, you know, the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, you know, the what happened, genocide after genocide. Genocide after genocide. Genocides have never ended. They've been with us since the beginning of time. What is the cause of genocide? This is the deep collective shadow that they used to call demons. And the way they got rid of demons was they burned the person who was hosting the demon at the stake. Yeah, these things have not gone away. We're still causing genocide. Our understanding of them is just not nearly complete. Our psychology is incomplete, not whole. Our understanding of demons and cults and conflicts, collective shadows, is incomplete. You know, we teach that this so-called God is loving. There is no evil. Well, that's not a good thing to do, because there clearly are actions that cause unbearable suffering that whole groups perpetuate against other groups. This is the collective shadows that I'm not excluding, but I'm not taking personally either, you know? And this is really important that you see this in a way that you're not possessed by it. For you, this is a metaphysical moral dilemma that you have to face and have to work your way through. When I was 17, my first exposure to something like this, like Ali's story, I wrote a poem. And the second part of the poem, the first part of the poem just talked about a screwed up, rebellious teenager that had very little wisdom at that time. And the second part of the poem dropped off a cliff into the abyss. And the second part of the poem was, oh my God, what hideous beast breathes in the shadowy depths of my haunted soul. Do some 3-2-1 shadow work on that, which I did for years. It took a while. But I don't see it as me being evil. I see it as me being a confused teenager that somehow had an experience of the demonic forces in the bardo, or in the collective unconscious, or in what Yogacara Buddhism calls the storehouse. You know, this is here now. And you know, those of us that have an inclination to experiencing what's in the bardo, like I get a sense that you might, we have to come to terms with this in our own way without taking it so personally that we're possessed by it. That won't turn out well. Yeah. So is that helpful at all to you?
Of course. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Yeah, my heart, we're suffering together here, you and I.
I can sense that, truly. Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck. Let me know if I can help.
Thanks, Gabalia. Thank you. Anyone else wants to share? Now is the time. Share, inquire, comment. Let's see. I don't know if Connor, you're raising your hand there, if you're just scratching your face. Bad time to scratch your face.
I was scratching my face, but I will ask the question. Both individually and collectively, is it possible to do shadow work in the absence of a wisdom tradition? In other words, in the absence of, as a fundamentalist or a literalist in any tradition, is it possible to do it in the absence of some?
The short answer to your question is yes, it absolutely is. The longer answer to your question is shadow work happens in the readiness of time. If I put my integral hat on and my integral understanding of shadow work, which I can't seem to get off anymore, I would say one of the most valuable things you can do is learn to meditate. Learn to become one with the emptiness so that you realize the emptiness isn't empty. There's deep mystery and intelligence somewhere in this emptiness. That's why they call it a mystery. We don't know where. So that loosening up the places where you're stuck is really important. I don't know so much about the religious aspect of things, but that meditative practice is the most important thing you can do to loosen things up. There's also, if we look developmentally, if we look at just individual development, what emerges first in the first 6 months is the infant learns how to move their body, control their body. We also learn how to populate the five sense consciousnesses. It's not the eyes that see, it's the visual consciousness that develops in the mind that learns how to see. And this happens in the first 6 months, 18 months of life. All five senses get populated. Then we learn language. Language emerges about 18 months old. What comes with language is a sense of self. The ego begins to develop, and our sixth sense consciousness in Buddhism, or our left brain, begins to form. And we start fuzzy thinking, which is liking and disliking things, which is really it's an analytical way of making decisions, as well as we start categorizing things as good and bad. This is development from about 2 to 3 years old to 5 or 6 years old. At 5 or 6 years old, we're enculturated into our parents' belief system. Then at puberty, we start thinking for ourselves and deciding what we want to believe. And that rational point of view, we suddenly develop the capacity to use a scientific method. It's not until we go off to college and become more worldly and begin to see the whole, begin to set things like systems thinking, where we can see the whole. That's where it becomes possible to really begin shadow work in earnest. To me, that's the readiness of time for people to begin to do shadow work. And that's often the age where people start identifying as spiritual but not religious. There's a big shift that happens. And that's where we begin the inner exploration into our own interiors. So, yes, it's possible to do therapy, different kinds of therapy at any point, but the kind of shadow work that we're talking about, where you're really seeing where you rub against something, you're learning to see it as an object, third person perspective, it's an it. And then we have a conversation with it. This is me talking to it. And that brings it into relationship with me, second person perspective. And then I own it. God, I didn't realize I was like that. I own it. I am like that. So now the it has a conversation with me and I own it. That's the first person perspective. I am that. That's the 3-2-1. That's just the reversal of taking a first person perspective, the terrible 2s and 3s, taking a second person perspective, 5 or 6, when you're indoctrinated into your belief system, when all of a sudden I suddenly see you, I can't just see me now. I see me and I see you both. Second person perspective. And then third person perspective, as I start thinking for myself, I start seeing all the objects around me. The 3-2-1 process is just it's reversing the course of individual human development. And there is the readiness of time, fourth person perspective, when you start seeing the whole you, and you start discovering that there's many parts of me that I can't see. And you start being able to see them interacting in a whole context. Connor, is that helpful to you?
Yeah, I think it addressed the question. I suppose what you've said is that it's in reversal. It's really a question of starting from the fourth person, if you like, and working back, because otherwise you might be trapped in the kind of first or second, or the ego or superego.
Well, that's true, Connor, but it's also these emergences. These are things that emerge. You can't have a second person perspective if you're 3 years old. That capacity for a second person perspective has not yet emerged. You can't, the capacity to use a scientific method and take a third person perspective can't emerge at 5 or 6. It has to wait until the whole person is ready for it to emerge, which takes years of development. And the fourth person perspective doesn't usually emerge until 20s, when you go off to college and you realize that, God, there are other people out there that believe very different than what I was taught to believe. That there's kind of an emergent pattern. It's called development. So you can't push the river. In the readiness of time, all things emerge when they're ready. And that postmodern fourth person perspective is where you really get curious and start exploring your own interior. And that's where the shadow work really becomes real. You can do it before that, but it won't be quite the same as it will be after that. So what we often do is we put out the fires, right? I have a problem, I have a relationship problem, and I go see a therapist. Exactly as we should. Put out the fires. Attend to what's broken, what needs attention. And you can do that at any age, of course.
Yeah.
Great question, Connor. Wish I had a simpler answer for you.
Thanks, Connor. And we have time for one more, I think. So anything you've been sitting on, burning away, Paloma?
Hello, Paloma.
Hello, Doshin. Do you know what I wanted to ask you? Okay, so no shadow work's real, and I have lots of shadows and all that, as everybody who knows me will tell you. But do you think it's really true that everybody who annoys you is part of your shadow? I mean, so many people annoy me in so many ways. I just think I couldn't have that many shadows, and I'm annoyed by so many simple things. Like, for example, if I would be in a supermarket and somebody was buying something horrible, right? I'd be looking in there saying, why are you buying that crap? Why are you buying that stuff? Why are you eating that? And then if it's in somebody's kitchen and they weren't cooking it properly, and they weren't cooking it with care and attention, I think,
so I'm going to slow you down here, Pamela. Notice how fast you're talking. It's almost like you want to run past something. You asked me a question and you didn't give me a chance to answer it.
Oh, did I not? I'm sorry. Right, I'll shut up then. Go ahead.
No, don't shut up. That's not what I just, you ask a really important question, and it's one that deserves an answer. And it's not just for you, it's for all of us. You ask this question. Where did you go? Did you disappear?
No.
Oh, there you are. Okay. I had trouble locating you. You moved on my screen.
Oh, did it?
It's such a good question. I don't want it to get swept into the stream of all your emotions that you're feeling right now. I want to really go back to the question because it's an excellent one. You asked me, as I remember, and please correct me if I'm not remembering correctly, which sometimes happens. You asked me if I thought it was true that every time something bothers us, it points to a shadow. And, I don't know whether it's true or not, but I do know it as I've dug into each one of them in my life, it has been true for me. Every time it's automatic. The minute something bothers me about something, I know I have shadow work yet to do. And it's goddamn endless.
It's so annoying.
It
That's
is
so
annoying.
annoying.
It is annoying. But
the
it's
thing
so
is, I know I am not like these people. I'm just really not like them. I'm not. I don't buy any crap. I'm
feeling a deja vu. For years I said the same bloody thing, and then I got humbled. Oh my God, it's true. I'm projecting all my shit onto everybody. Now that doesn't mean. Here's the really important thing here to keep in mind. Let's say this is a projection I got a lot in the past, and thank God I'm not getting it nearly as much anymore. But everybody would look at me and they would either think or say, well, you arrogant asshole. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, so I am a little arrogant, and I certainly can be challenging. So they would project that onto me, but guess what? I am that. There's such a beautiful hook right here that they can hang that projection on. So that's the important thing to keep in mind. You can't project a projection onto somebody that doesn't have that quality. So you are seeing correctly. They are that way. But the reason it bothers you is because so are you. And that's been.
I'm not.
I'm sorry?
Well, just say, for example, take the example of the person in the supermarket buying horrible food and horrible stuff.
So can you be really specific with your example? Let's not just talk horrible. What exactly did they buy?
So they're buying like cheap bread that's bad for you. They're buying like low-fat margarine instead of proper butter. They're buying just lots of processed foods, packets of food instead of just fresh vegetables that you cook yourself. That's enough. There, go with that.
Yeah. So what?
So I just think, why are you buying all that stuff? What are you doing spending your money buying all that? It's nonsense. Why don't you buy proper food? Look at the shape of you. Go and buy.
Why do you care? Why do you care? Is it any of your business what they do?
No, I am very nosy though. I mean, I'll own that. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't get all upset about it in the supermarket, but I just look down my nose at them.
Yeah, but just slow down. You're not answering the question. Is it any of your business what they do?
No, but does that matter?
Yeah, does it impact you at all? And why does it bother you? That's the question.
Because I think everybody should be like me and do what I do.
So do I. Now there's the truth. That's a universal truth. Everybody should be like me. Anybody else have that truth? The world would just be perfect if everybody was like me. Oh my God, it'd be a nightmare if everybody was like me.
It'd be great fun if they're all like me. I'm only kidding. It would be a nightmare.
Yeah. Just think of what a nightmare that would be. Oh my God, I wouldn't want to be there. God, all these arrogant assholes, I don't want to deal with them. There's only one I have to deal with. No matter where I go, there he is. And as soon as I start dealing with him and start owning my shit, as soon as I started saying, oh my God, I'm an arrogant asshole, things started changing. Things started changing in my life.
I feel as if I've done that. Yeah, I feel as if I have
Well,
owned a lot of the horrible things
I would
about myself.
suggest to you that you might have a little more work to do there.
But I suggest you're probably wrong. I'm only pulling your leg. Of course, you're right. I know that, but it's hard to find it. It's hard to find these things because I feel so diametrically opposed
Yeah.
to the things that annoy me.
You know, there's only one thing that'll help. You need to learn to love all parts of yourself,
Yeah, I think I do.
especially
So
those you despise and project onto others.
yeah,
Make it a practice to do 3, 2, 1. See it as an object, have a conversation with it, and then own it and learn to love it and integrate it into who you are. You know what I finally discovered when I started owning my arrogant asshole? I need that guy to be complete. There are times when it's really helpful to have him in the back seat. And I say, okay, come on, it's your turn. Talk to this guy. And I really need that to be whole. So I had to learn to love it.
yeah. I really get that. I think that's, yeah. And I feel as if I do love all my, I feel sorry for my wee ego and all the things. I'm very gentle with my ego. I don't judge my ego, and I'm,
Paloma,
I
you
know
are
I'm.
so colorful. I just really appreciate how colorful you are.
Thank
You
you
got a
very
lot
much.
going on, girl.
Well, okay, I'll stop talking, but it's been lovely to talk with you.
It has been lovely.
Thank you.
And thanks for stepping up and showing us all of you, or several colorful parts of yourself. They were delightful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paloma. Thanks everyone for really great questions, and also just really being having the courage to kind of be honest. It's been a real pleasure, very enjoyable to.
This is what I call being real, and it's so much better than just being falsely nice. Don't you get sick of nice people?
Yeah,
Give me
no
a
time
real
for them.
person. Thank you all very much. Thank you,
Thank
Ali.
you, Doshin. Yeah, and well, we'll see you soon. We've got lots coming up, as you know, from our weekly emails. And could we all unmute ourselves and say thank you to Doshin and a goodbye to everyone else and Doshin.
Thank you, Doshin.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Doshin.
Doshin.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Fantastic
Thank you.